Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh, I can see everybody is just popping in and joining us. Welcome, welcome everybody. And as you are coming in and getting settled, I'd love for you to, I'm assuming everybody at this point in our pandemic journey has already gotten familiar with Zoom, but just in case you're not, find your chat field and introduce yourself. Tell us how old your kids are and tell us what you're hoping to gain from today, maybe what your struggles are with your kids. I'm excited to see where everyone is coming from and what they're dealing with. So not necessarily where you're geographically coming from, although that's interesting too, but yeah, I just love to hear from all of you guys in the chat field, how old your kids are especially, and probably maybe what your biggest struggle is with them or what you're hoping to gain from today. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to introduce myself to anyone who doesn't already know who I am, which would be sort of weird because you're getting my emails, but just in case. I'm Ann Kaplan. I am a parent coach. I also am a mom. I have 4 of my own kids. My oldest son is 16. My youngest kiddo is 7. So I am all over the place in all the stages of motherhood simultaneously. It's pretty fun. The other thing I want to encourage you guys to do is to turn on your videos so that I feel like I'm actually talking to real people. That really helps me out. It's a bit doing me a solid, and it's doing everybody else a solid when you do turn your video on, because now we all get to see that we're all in this together, that we're all going through this stuff, and that we're all here. We're actually human beings all together in a group. Thanks, Jen, for getting the chat field started. Very much appreciated. Like I said, everyone, as you're logging in, I'd love to hear how old your kids are and what your biggest struggle is, what you're hoping to get out of today, all of that stuff. So just a tiny bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to dive in because I actually had to remove some slides yesterday when I was practicing. I was like, oh no, this is going to be way too much. So we've got a lot, and I really want to make sure we have time for Q&A and stuff and dialogue. This is a workshop, not a lecture. I really want to keep it interactive. So, okay, so just tiny bits of housekeeping. Found the chat field, hopefully. I can see chats coming in there, which is awesome. If you haven't used the raise hand function before, that will be helpful for me if you do. If you can't figure it out, that's totally fine. Unmuting yourself is fine. We're a small group and that's totally cool. But if you look in the participants area of your Zoom field, you should be able to kind of scroll over yourself and raise your hand. Also, for some people who have different versions of Zoom, you might be able to find the raise hand function by looking down below where it says reactions. So if you're looking to raise your hand, which I'm going to ask you guys to do at different times, do it. And oh my gosh, I'm looking at all those great messages. Jen's got a 12-year-old, self-harm. I'm going to talk about that, Jen. And thanks for being honest and candid, sharing that right from the get-go. It's really huge. Yeah, lots of hard stuff. I hear that. Marina, Marina is DMC laptop, but she's not sure how to change her profile name. Marina, if you go to yourself, so scroll over your little square and look for the 3 dots. It'll say rename. Rename is one of your options. And oh, she says she can't talk. Good to know, Marina. Erica's got a 9-year-old, really great getting a head start with the tween stuff. 12-year-old, 14-year-old, 10 and 12, and dealing with ADHD, which is definitely challenging. I totally hear about that. Some new parenting strategies. Yes, all these parents are chiming in saying, I'm in the middle of remote learning. I'm in the same room as my kid, blah, 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 which is pretty funny because one of the disclaimers I was going to give you today is that I have a potty mouth. I am going to do my absolute utmost best to be rated PG today. And anybody who knows me, there's a couple of my clients who are logged in here, you'll know that I normally swear like a sailor. So I'm going to absolutely do my 100% best. Okay, let's hop into what we're actually going to talk about today. So I'm actually going to screen share with you guys because I've got slides. I'm all fancy today. Okay, so this is what I want to talk about today. I'm going to talk to you about the fundamentals of parenting that I teach to all my clients, regardless of what age their kids are. And then I'm going to specifically talk about how we need not necessarily even to change what we're doing, but enhance what we're doing to really feed into what our kids need when they're in this age group. And then I'm going to spend some time talking about the bond and connection and relationship we have with our kids. It is fundamentally important. I mean, of course, with all age children, but specifically with this aged kid, the more solid and concrete your bond is with your kid, the more connected and the better you are at maintaining that connection, the more that your parenting tools are going to stick and are going to be well received, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So almost more than at any time in parenting, I feel like maintaining relationship and humanity, for lack of a better word, in our parenting is so profound at this age group. So we're going to spend some time talking about that. And then I'm going to talk to you about basically staying sane while we're going through this chapter, because it's great for me to talk to you about these great consequences and how to give them to your kids. And it's so important to stay calm and have a great relationship with your kids. But if we're not actually taking care of ourselves and dealing with the pressures and challenges that come up while we're going through this period as parents, it's not going to happen. You're not going to be able to implement. So we're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to talk to you about how to take everything we learned today and really make it stick, take it beyond just a fun workshop or a head scratching workshop. And like I said, I want to leave tons of time for Q&A. I saw that I got a comment. It's very hard to read comments while I'm screen sharing, unfortunately. So I will promise you that I'm not going to screen share the whole time, and I will come back to all comments. Okay, this is what I call the parenting hamster wheel. This is actually an image I use in my presentations, even when I'm not talking about teens and tweens. This is a place that I find most of my clients are in when we first start, and I think it's very easy to get into this place. So let's start at the bottom right in this image, which is unhealthy behavior. Our kids are having unhealthy behavior. Maybe it's misbehavior, breaking rules. It could be self-harm, like we've discussed. Anything that's just really not serving them well, either because it's breaking rules or because it's just not good for them. And usually kids are doing this from a parenting perspective. Kids are doing this because they really don't have a whole lot of skin in the game. We have not incentivized them well enough to motivate them to make different choices, or there's something else incentivizing them more to make bad choices. Often there's poor emotions going on into this, and this kind of victim and blame dance that's happening with kids. And I'm going to talk more about that when we complete the circle here, but just kind of put a pin in that for now. And just let's start with the fact that our kids are misbehaving. That often leads to our parents' intense emotions. We're frustrated with them. We probably feel a little bit hopeless, like, I don't know what to do about this kid. I'm scared. I'm scared that my kid's not safe. I'm scared of what this might mean for the future. I'm scared about what it might mean for myself. Frustration, anger, you name it, all the intense emotions. Mama's got the feels. And when we're in that state, we usually are using parenting skills that don't work that great. Lecturing, yelling, threatening, or bribing our kids. So, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're losing your phone for a week. Or if you do this, that, or the other thing, I'll buy you a bicycle. That is actually a real example from my real life. I actually did that with one of my kids. I told him if he could get all his schoolwork done, I would buy him a new bike, and it didn't work. Also, this kind of solicitous place that we sometimes fall into that trap of, like, basically almost like begging our kids to behave because we don't really know what else to do. Repeating ourselves, constantly reminding our kids about things, just getting to that place where it's like, I'm repeating myself all day long to a room full of people who are ignoring me. I want to blow my brains out. And then the other thing that I see a lot with these kind of ineffective parenting tools is this kind of place where we just do it ourselves because it's not worth it either to fight, or we can't figure out how to get our kids to do stuff. So we wind up doing it basically ourselves. I have fallen into that trap, even with schoolwork, where I'm like, here, why don't you just tell me what you want to say in your paper and I'll write it for you. Like, anything, please, to get this thing done. Or also rescuing, like really seeing where our kids are headed, and we don't want them to fall, to experience that consequence. So we step in and swoop in and rescue them and they don't have the consequence. And this is where, remember I said I was going to complete the circle. This kind of parenting contributes to the bad emotions that our kids are feeling and that victim and blame thing. If we're screaming and yelling and threatening at our kids, it's really easy for them to see us as their problem, the source of all of their problems, the reason why they can't have what they want, or the reason why they feel the way they feel. It's really, we're the boogeyman, right? It makes it really, really easy. So like I said, this cycle exists in all levels of parenting, not just with teens and tweens. What is different when our kids get older is they are now contributing in ways that they didn't when they were younger to this cycle. So we've got this situation, we can see, with younger kids, we can see like, okay, well, what's the solution? I need to fix my parenting. And 99% of the time, unless we're talking about kids that are extremely neuroatypical and need extra support, adjusting our parenting is often all that's needed to get our kids' behavior back on track. But this is a whole different ballgame when we're talking about teens and tweens, because we're not the only piece of this puzzle. Uh-oh, my thingy's not working. Ah! Here we go. There, that's what I wanted to show you. Our teens and tweens are contributing to this unhealthy behavior. We can tweak and adjust and do all the quote unquote right things as a parent and adjust our behavior. But now our kids are a huge piece of the puzzle in ways they just weren't when they were kids. Do you love this picture that I found on the internet? This kid probably didn't realize when she posted a picture of herself on the internet that I could just screenshot it and use it in my presentation. So there you go, a cautionary tale. So let's talk about what exactly is that teen contribution. The adolescent, the child, is going through their own hamster wheel, okay? Kids are just different at this age, and we've heard it all in all these complex, stupid, annoying ways about frontal lobes and all of that stuff, and I really don't find it to be useful to talk about things that way, also because the most recent research about this stuff shows that that's really not exactly true. But to just put ourselves in our kids' experience for a minute, this kid is changing. Things are so different for them. Their bodies are changing. That's the most obvious thing, right? And I don't know about you guys, but I started seeing that stuff in my kids when they were like 8. And it's important to remember that if your kid's body is changing, there's stuff on the inside that's changing too. And it's not just their physiology, but that the kind of hormonal cocktail that they're hanging out in is different. Their brains are changing in massive ways. So first of all, kids are thinking about things in different ways. And I'm not just talking about the impulsivity and the non-rational thinking. I'm talking about the fact that our kids now all of a sudden have this new layer of complexity in the way that they're capable of seeing the world. And most kids that are going through this period of their lives are grappling with questions and ideas that never occurred to them before. Existential questions like, what's the meaning of money or life, or why do we live, or what's the point if you're just going to die? These are conversations that are very common and normal for parents to have with their kids, because all of a sudden your kids are thinking about things in nuanced ways that weren't available to them before, and can create feelings inside them that are pretty overwhelming and can feel a little bit above their pay grade. The other thing that's really important to understand that's super different right now with our kids is their priorities are different. So in early childhood, school age, elementary school age, the most important thing to a kid is their family. If things are rock solid at home, if things are good, if your relationship is good, if things are pretty stable and consistent at home, friend drama, moving schools, moving towns, stuff going on with extended family, those things might bother our kids or be challenging for their kids, but they don't rock our kids the way that they can when our kids are older. And it's because their priorities are changing. They are wired to care a lot more about what's going on outside the nuclear family than they were when they were younger. So this is what's going on for our kids. And this leads them to having unhealthy behaviors. They're trying to take care of all of this craziness inside them in really dumb, boneheaded ways. And that's not necessarily because of our quote unquote poor parenting, but just because that's what their knee-jerk reaction is to respond to what's going on within them. So that's that teenager that was added to that chart before. And that unhealthy behavior we see with teens: irresponsibility, outbursts, could be angry, could be violent, could just be yelling and screaming, could be just even not angry, but upset or emotional, but just extreme emotion, right? Isolationism, disengagement from the rest of the family, procrastinating on stuff, putting it off to the last minute, self-harm, like has already been brought up so early on in this workshop, which I think is both amazing and tragic at the same time, but it's a big deal. Manipulation and triangulation, those two things are really great ways that kids like to see how they can kind of finagle a situation and poke holes in our systems, right? So especially if there's teachers involved, or if parents are separated and in co-parenting, or if there's a therapist or whatever, there's this like kind of triangulation going on, is the best word, where it's like, well, she doesn't know about that, so maybe I can get away with it with this other person, and then I'll just tell this person that thing. All the fun stuff, right? I didn't put lying on here, but that's, I feel like, a blanket that can go over the whole thing. And then that unhealthy behavior is leading to intense emotions in our kids, because our kids are doing things that are misaligned with their values. I don't know your kid. I don't know what your kid's values are, but I can promise you their values are not hurting the people around them, being alone and sad. You know, that's not a child, that's not any human being's values, but the behaviors that they're doing violate their values and create a lot of intense emotion with our kids. That thought feeds into what's already going on with them. It feeds into those thoughts and feelings. And the cycle goes around and around and around. So I think it's just important to understand two things out of this. Number one is we are going to improve our parenting, and that's not the only thing anymore. And two, it's freaking hard being a teenager or a tween. Like, there is stuff happening here. And the more that we can, this is like I said before, weave that humanity into our work, the better. So let's talk about the principles of parenting, the tweaking of parenting that we're going to do. And then we're going to talk about how to help with the adolescent's contribution to the whole system. Okay. If you're my client already, this is not going to be news to you. These are the 4 fundamentals of effective parenting that I teach to all of my clients. I teach it to my kids too, but in a different way. And if you're struggling with your kid, I promise you that at least one of these 4 principles is not on track. It's misaligned in some way. So the first principle is control. We only have the ability and right to control ourselves. Now, most of you are probably not disagreeing with me having written this here. This is something that we say all the time. How many times have we all said, like, oh, you can only control yourself, right? But when you look at boots on the ground, the way that we parent our kids, most of the time we're trying to control them. If you're coming to this workshop today thinking, I want to learn how to get my kid to get their homework done, or I want to learn how to get my kid to have more confidence, I want to learn how to get my kid to be respectful at the dinner table, or whatever it is, you're coming at your parenting from the idea, how can I get an outcome for my child? And the answer is you cannot, because you can't control anyone but yourself. The other thing that's important to note, so if you're my client, you've already heard this spiel, pay attention right now. With teenagers, what's even more important to understand is not only is this impossible, but trying to control other people creates huge disconnection and distance in relationships. So the more that we double down and try to control our kids, the more we are really damaging and weakening that kind of, I really picture, especially at this age, my relationship with my kids, or the parent-child relationship, as this like thread that connects the two of us. And we really want that thread to be super strong and not this like fragile thing that could snap at any second. So this specific principle can really help get at that for us. Okay, principle number 2, autonomy. All humans deeply desire control and independence. Basically, nobody likes to be bossed around. So these two principles come together in a really amazing way when you're working with me and we're learning how to respond to our kids' behavior in the form of changing the way we talk to our kids. It can be something as simple as wordsmithing the way you speak to your child so that you're not giving directives anymore. You're not saying, do this, don't do that, go come over here, you know, whatever. We're not saying things that way to our kids, which if anyone talks to me that way, it doesn't even matter what they're saying or how rational or reasonable their request is, I won't do it because you're not the boss of me. So putting this stuff together can completely transform the way that we even just communicate with our children, and it can completely change the results we get with our kids. Next principle, experiences. The most profound and lasting type of learning comes from experiences. This is just fancy talk for natural consequences. So kids learn from making a mistake and seeing what happens when they make that mistake. All of the explaining, all of the lecturing, all of the yelling, all of the bribing and incentivizing and all of that stuff, it will not teach our kids at all. All it does is weaken the relationship. What we really need to be doing is giving a consequence. When we give a consequence, we are literally engineering an experience for our kids that enables them to learn a lesson. The other thing that kids learn really well from is modeling. So modeling and experiences, that's, if you're working with me, that's the ball game. All of our talking and blabbering with our kids is not parenting. It's just talking, which I'm going to get to in a positive way later on when we talk about relationship and stuff. And then the last principle is neutrality. Intensity negates everything. All human beings crave energy, intensity, emotion, and attention from the people around them. That's how our brains are programmed to feel like we belong in our clan or whatever. And because of that, even if the attention and intensity a child gets from their behavior is negative, if it's yelling or disappointment or frustration or a big long lecture or whatever, even if that's the response they get, it's still an intense response. And so we are accidentally reinforcing our kids' negative behaviors when we get upset about them. So I really work with my clients so that I want you to have tons and tons and tons of emotion with your kid outside of discipline. When you're just talking with your kid, when you're having fun with your kid, when your kid makes great choices, I want you to be like an emotion explosion. And when your child makes a mistake, I want you to be like, no skin off my nose, here's what's going to happen. That is a huge game changer for most parents. And it's easier said than done, which I'm also going to talk about in a minute. So let's talk about this in terms specifically of teenagers. The first thing is that teens need clarity in their consequences and in their discipline. So of course, clarity is great all the time, but it becomes more profoundly important with this older age group. You know, when our kids are young, when they're 2 or 3 years old, we can say stuff to them like, you know, when I feel like you're going to make a good decision with this ball, I'll give it back to you, since the kid was throwing their ball in the house. Well, that's really vague. But for a 2-year-old, that's fine because, you know, they're in a place in their life where it's, you know, Jesus, take the wheel. Like, you're in charge, mom. I'm just with you. And I trust that you're taking the reins and you're running the show. That's not going to work anymore for these older kids. They don't trust that we're running the show. In fact, they hate that we're running the show and they think we're making a really big mistake running the show. And so when we give a consequence to a teenager or a tween, we need to be so clear. You're welcome to use YouTube again when I feel like you're going to make good choices with it. I will know that you can make good choices with YouTube when you have used your computer in the living room well without any intervention for 3 days straight, for example. Something very, very clear. Okay, teens also need motivation. So remember how everyone talks about how this age group, they have like all this impulsivity and they're not super rational? Well, what that means is that they can't see the big picture. They can't see the long vision. So a huge mistake we make as parents of older kids is giving them super intense or like long-term consequences because we think like, okay, you know, you're not a kid anymore and you just really screwed up. So you will be losing your phone for a week, or you're grounded for a month or whatever. The problem is that because of the way that these kids' brains are wired right now, like a week is like a year, a month is like a century, and basically what they feel like is, what's the point? I'm not going to be able to do it. I can't be good for a whole week. I can't do all the things you want me to do. Perfection is the only option here, and it's impossible for me, so screw it. And the more extreme, this happens almost all the time with my clients with teens, the more extreme the consequences get, the less the child even tries to do better. So we want them to have easy wins, really quick, easy wins, especially if you're just working on completely transforming your kids' behavior. We want them to have quick, easy wins right away in the beginning. So something very, very, very simple. And the more buy-in we get from kids, the more we can push them to kind of trust us that we're going to follow through on our word, that it's worth it to try, all of those things. We want the pathway to restoration to be part of our discipline. So we're not just giving them a consequence, we're also giving them a clear path to earning their privileges back. And it needs to be a realistic path. It can't be, you know, you can have your phone back once your room is clean, you've done your chores for a week, you've been respectful to me the entire time, and you have no missed assignments. Well, freaking forget it. I'll just like start using carrier pigeon or something. I guess I'm not going to ever have my phone. What's the point? So it needs to be very, very realistic, clear, and easy, doable. Okay. And then the last thing I put here is respect. And I mean this much more in the sense of acknowledgement than, the kind of respect that, Aretha's talking about. What I mean is, especially when we talk about respect for your child, acknowledgement of what your child is going through, but also acknowledgement of who your child is. This is the beauty and exciting part about parenting kids this age. We can see who they are in ways that were like this kind of question mark when they were younger. They're showing us what they care about and what they want and what they like, and how they see the world and the things that are important to them and all of those things. And weaving that into our parenting now, first of all, is a really exciting opportunity, but it's also going to be so much more effective. And then the same thing when it comes to yourself. I want you to think about respecting and acknowledging yourself in several ways. The first is, don't try to be someone you're not. Be yourself as a parent. Parent on your own terms. Set the rules in your home for what's going to work for you, not what you think you're supposed to do or what teens need or whatever. It needs to be something that's actually true to you. The second way that I mean respecting yourself is, this is freaking hard, and you need support. We need a sounding board. We need skills. We need to educate ourselves. Like, honor the fact that you're not supposed to ever do this alone. We're not meant to parent in an echo chamber. And reaching out for support is one of the best ways that you can show respect to yourself. And then the third way I mean to respect yourself is, don't be a doormat. We get into a place often with this age group where it's so scary, their feelings, especially the mom who was talking about self-harm. It's scary. The risks are scary, what they're up against. The behaviors that they're having are scary. And also it means something different to us now than it did when they were younger. And what can often happen is that we sort of just think, well, if I can just get them to do X, Y, and Z, it's fine. Or if they would just be happy, I would feel less scared. This is kind of not necessarily your overt thought process, but this is what's happening behind the scenes. And so I'll acquiesce on this, or I'll give them this thing, or it would make them so happy if I, like in the scenario with my son, he didn't get all his schoolwork done. And I realized that I was in a really bad situation because he was counting on that bike. I knew that it would make him happy, and biking was like one of the only things in his life at that point that he was doing that was even close to healthy. And now I was in a situation of either going back on my word and buying him the bike because I knew that I really should have never set myself up in this situation in the first place, or doubling down and not giving him the bike. And I was literally scared that if I did that, he would be so sad and so upset and so angry. I didn't know what he would do. And so being a doormat with our kids is not going to serve them, even in those scary situations. And goes back to my second point, which is how much support we need to stay strong and see the forest for the trees when we're in the thick of it. Before, I'm gonna actually stop screen sharing right now. Or I'm gonna try to. Here we go. I did it. I'm going to stop screen sharing right now because I just want to give you guys a chance to ask some questions specifically about the parenting stuff before I start talking about relationship stuff. So if you know how to use the raise hand thing and you want to raise your hand, go for it. If you don't, I'm totally fine for you to just unmute yourself and start talking. And in the meantime, I'm going to read some of these chat thingies. Oh, Jen asked, we'll be getting these slides to reference later. So I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain. I don't normally share my recorded stuff just to everybody, but anytime somebody emails me and asks me for it, I always give it to them. So yes, you have to be assertive, but I will give it to you. Okay, no questions at all. I don't believe you.
Okay.
How do I?
So I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, and my husband's bringing me laundry, but that's okay because actually folding things actually like makes me like less stressed. Like the only all right, cool. It's not just me. Okay, so I guess I don't know if this is a question or a statement or a something. My kid sees therapist. I'm now seeing my therapist twice a week. I'm the one who has the kiddo who's actually I just found out has been cutting, so. I guess I don't even know if this, I struggle with my own mental health stuff that's been really bad recently. And now I'm trying to figure out how I'm supposed to manage my own stuff while also like I'm terrified because I just found out he's cutting.
Yes. So
that's like, I don't know if that's just like putting it out into the world, even though I have like a support system and stuff.
You're allowed to cry, by the way.
I see my therapist in an hour and a half or at 4. So yeah, but yeah, I know I'm just, I don't know, I'm kind of just a mess right now.
Yeah. So I think this is bringing up a really good point that I think the rest of the talk will help you with, but I just really want to kind of draw attention to it, which is, first of all, it's good and great and please, yes, you are getting therapy and so is your son. That's going to be great. I think what I think your question highlights is the disconnect between the care that you're getting and the care that he's getting. Then that just exists in the system, unfortunately. And then also the disconnect between the mental health support that we're getting and then, okay, well, what do I do boots on the ground? And I think that's what you're getting at with your question. Am I right?
Yeah. It's like he's getting his stuff, but then we're in this custody thing where he's with his dad right now. And I mean, well, he's actually here with me for spring break, but it's just,
yeah.
And his dad sexually assaulted me when we were married. So it makes it hard because there's not like co-parenting really happening. Yeah. His dad actually hasn't even responded to my email saying like, hey, FYI, like, you know, our kid's cutting his wrists. It's not even like a response. And I'm kind of like, oh, how is he supposed to go back in a week? And
yeah. It's a end of questions without answers, and there's like the emotional questions, but then there's also the logistical questions. Honestly, this is why I have a job, because in my opinion, coaching doesn't have to be with me, but coaching is the bridge of that gap.
Right.
Doesn't replace therapy. Absolutely not. I would never say that. It helps you to take the stuff that you're getting in therapy and the stuff that your son is getting in therapy and figure out what to do with it.
Right. Okay.
And have tools, not just a place to go and get support and hopefully reframe your emotions and your thoughts, which is what you get from therapy, but also tools to use day to day that are like, okay, I have to answer this unanswerable question. What's the plan on how do I answer those kinds of questions? Like,
right.
My coach gave me a tool, or I can actually ask my coach, or there's actually something in this workbook that's about that. You know, like that piece, I think is missing in the traditional approach to some of this stuff. And I think it's a problem across the board, whatever age kids we're dealing with. But I think it really rears its head at this age group.
Yeah, and it was totally when you said like the bike thing, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so like guilty, especially now. I mean, it's only been like 3 days, but I'm like, okay, whatever he wants. I'm like, oh yeah, you want to like, do whatever. Like, yeah, totally. It's not self-harming. Fantastic. Like, great. I
Yeah.
will support whatever. And at the same time, I'm also like, he hasn't picked up a book in like a month. And I was like, okay, cool. I want you to go pick a book and, just read for a little bit. And he's like, and, just horrified. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like here I am just being like, hey, this like healthy thing. Like,
So here's one
and I
thing.
feel bad about like, I don't want to be like, well, yeah, I want you to read, or like, I want you to go walk the dog, or like,
Mhm.
then I feel, yeah.
I'm not supposed to be trying to control him. Do I just say like, way to go, here's a razor blade, son? I mean, what?
I know. I'm like, oh God.
Like, I'm not supposed to be getting you or making you walk the dog. Then am I allowed to say, I want you to walk the dog? Like, I totally get where.
Yeah, and if he says no, then I'm like,
Yeah. So
okay, that's totally fine too. Like,
whatever you say.
great. Like, whatever. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah. So the one thing, because first of all, this place that you're in is really overwhelming. So I could like just verbal diarrhea on you, like my entire course curriculum, and it would just be too much and you wouldn't see any effect because you wouldn't be able to implement it. But the one thing I'm going to say right now is kids who are misbehaving, especially the way that your son is, I hate to say misbehaving, but let's say making unhealthy choices like cutting and things like that. One of the biggest kind of like feelings that's behind that is being out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's very tempting for us to loosen the reins and say, oh, well, the solution is to just let this kid be in charge because they obviously have some things they want to do and they can't do it. And that's why they're sad. And that's why they're reacting this way. That's usually,
It's kind of like the opposite.
yeah. Like the more that they see that you've got it, like mom's got this, you're good, the more secure they're going to feel. And it's not necessarily going to cure this problem in and of itself, but just
Right.
know that loosening the reins and having everything just go bonkers is not going to solve this problem. It's not going to
Okay.
get him the feeling, like think about the feelings that he needs to have to stop doing this. It's security.
Security. Yeah.
It's just like really what do I want to say, like secure in his place in the world, if I'm explaining myself well.
Yeah.
This kind of like, oh well, it used to be that you have chores but now you don't because I'm afraid of you, is definitely not going to give him those feelings.
Okay, that's really good advice. I like that.
Okay, really great question, Jen. Thanks for raising
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, thank you.
I think the rest of this stuff about connection and emotional stuff is going to really dovetail well with this for you.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share again. And I think I accidentally advanced my slides a little bit, but whatever. You know what? Okay, so we already did this. Okay, let's talk about maintaining the relationship. And like I said, I just want to send like a huge like empathy dart out to every one of you if this is where you're at, which is this place where it's like, I'm losing my kid. My kid is slipping away from me. I don't know about you guys, but when my kid was about 15, I had this like throat punch, a realization that like in a few years he was going to leave, and then he would get to choose if he wanted to talk to me or see me or be in a relationship with me at all. And talk about that fear factor. And then all of a sudden you start being like the worst, most out of control mom ever. I was like, what if he hates me? And he seemed like he hated me. That was for sure. And so, it was like I was afraid of losing him. So I started behaving in ways that just completely weakened our relationship. And it was just self-sabotage like crazy. So I want to talk about, like, remember what I said about like, I want you to be neutral and very little words when you're disciplining your kids. This is something that my clients learn, and once we've learned this, it is very liberating. The separation between discipline and connection, discipline versus communication with our kids. So when you're working with me, discipline is action. It is only action. Words and talking is not discipline. It is just talking. And so it usually involves physical activity on the part of the parent. It means getting up and actually taking your kid's phone away from them. It means logging in and changing the parental settings on stuff. It means physically going and picking your kid up from a party because they told you they had their work done and it turns out they didn't. It's physical action on our part. And that is challenging at first, especially if we've spent a lot of time with our kids trying to kind of get them to do stuff by convincing them, by talking and, you know, or repeating ourselves over and over again, or reminding them over and over again. It's challenging to switch gears there. But when you do, the cool thing about having done that, well, first of all, it works better. So your kid's behavior is going to be better. But also, that means that all the times that you're just talking with your kid, it's just about talking with them. It's just about your relationship. It's not about parenting them. It's not about disciplining them. It's just about being in a relationship with them. Knowing that, hey, I've got my discipline well in hand because I have a plan. I know exactly what to do. I know I can take action. So when my kid brings it up to me at the dinner table that he thinks, you know, Hitler was actually a great guy, instead of being like, what? You can't think that? That's terrible. You know, whatever. We can sit down and say, well, that's really interesting. I wonder why you think that. And have a conversation with our kid without any agenda whatsoever. And that kid feels heard. And you actually get to know your child, even if 90% of what's coming out of their mouth is nonsense posturing. Like, obviously your kid doesn't think Hitler was awesome, but they're trying to get a rise out of you, right? You don't have to give them the rise because you don't have to worry that you're not parenting them or disciplining them properly. This moment in time is just about relationship. That is huge because probably for many of us, especially depending on how old your kid are, you might have already gotten to the point where pretty much every word that comes out of your mouth, anytime you're actually talking to your kid, it's really about either taking care of the nuts and bolts, taking care of business, or getting them to do something that you've been trying to get them to do for forever, or checking to see if they're okay. Like, and no other times are you actually just talking with them. So I want you to kind of imagine that all of those objectives that you have in the way that you're talking to your kid right now are already being handled by your actions. Now you might have the same amount of times that you're talking to your kid, but every time that you're talking to your kid, it's a meaningful and strengthening interaction. Because let's face it, there's less times that we're interacting with our kids when they're this age than when they were younger. They love to just like go and hang out in their cocoon in their bedroom all day long if we'd let them, right? Okay, the next thing about maintaining the relationship. We want to try to, this slide shouldn't say meet needs outside of discipline. It should say provide the opportunity for a child to meet their needs outside of discipline. So this is something that if you stay until the end and you decide to sign up for a consultation today, I'm also going to be sending you an actual guide that talks about this little bullet here a little bit more. And I'm going to kind of show you a little image of it in a sec. But this concept that kids, all humans, not just kids, we have these needs: the need for love and belonging, the need for power and control, the need for freedom, fun, and survival. When kids are misbehaving, they are just having a misguided attempt to meet one of those needs in a really unhealthy way. The way we know that it's unhealthy is because it violates their values, it violates our family's values, it violates our values, and also it feels like crap. So even the cutting example is an example of a kid who's probably trying to meet his need for power and control. It might even also be love and belonging if he's like found some Facebook group, probably not Facebook because that's for old ladies, but Snapchat or Instagram or something where he's seeing messaging about how cool it is to hate yourself and all that nonsense. But our kids are trying to meet their needs. They just don't know necessarily how to meet them healthily. They're not super in touch with their values. Like, here we are as adults saying, oh, I'm doing this thing and it feels like crap. Well, it's probably because I'm violating my own rules and values and standards here, and that doesn't feel good to me. That's a pretty advanced concept that this age group, especially if we're talking about younger kids like tweens, they don't know that yet. They don't even know what their values are necessarily. And they might not know how to meet these needs healthily. So I want to kind of encourage you to look at your kids' misbehaviors, get curious about what needs they might be trying to meet, And then see if there's ways for those needs to be met outside of your kind of parenting, quote unquote, interactions with them. This isn't about their behavior, it's about opportunities, right? So a need for love and belonging, you might be able to meet by setting up an impromptu get together with someone who's, you know, is a really good and healthy friend for them. Even if you asked them they wanted to do it, they would say, no, I hate you. But something like that. Or the need for power and control can be woven into letting kids pick what the movie is, letting kids pick where we go for dinner, letting kids pick anything. Anytime we can give kids agency, it is a win. Okay, so like I said, that's a big concept. I'm going to give you guys a chance to get like an actual 4-page workbook that'll walk you through this one specific thing. So I recognize that I'm sort of just like dropping a little Easter egg for you there. And then the last thing I like to talk about is co-creation. So like I said before, our kids are showing us who they really are. Use that in the sense of incorporating your knowledge about who they are into your plans, into your approach, into your family contract, for example, or the way that you discipline your kids or the rules that you're setting. Also, incorporate that by asking them, actually including them in making plans and agreements about behavior and things like that. These ways of showing kids how to maintain a relationship with us and showing kids how they can have a relationship with us, it doesn't have to be adversarial, is huge. And my clients, when we're working together about this stuff, we talk about communication, literally getting a cheat sheet of like, these are the beginnings of sentences. These are the only things you're allowed to say when you're talking to your kid. Things like, oh, that's really interesting. Or I wonder, blah, blah, blah. Or I feel blah when you say blah. Like these things that are slip out of our heads when we're in the moment with our kids. And if we were able to use these kinds of responses to the things they say, we would be not only strengthening our relationship with them, but actually communicating with them in ways that they're actually going to hear. Okay, so that is profoundly important. This is the guide I was just talking to you about. It's literally just a 4-page workbook that walks you through these needs that I was describing. What we're talking about is, it's called choice theory. It was developed by a psychologist named William Glasser. It talks about the needs that we all have and how we make choices to meet those needs, and our choices may or may not be aligned with our values. And this really helps you kind of identify what your family values are and how you demonstrate those, how you are living in alignment with them, how you might not be. So Jen, one of the reasons why it feels so icky right now is because you're probably contemplating parenting in ways that are completely contrary to your actual values. And then also how to look at your kids' behavior that way, how to identify their misbehaviors and what needs they're meeting, all of those things. So for anybody who signs up for a consultation today, you're going to get this in addition to a free consultation with me. Okay, the last piece I want to say, actually, let me stop sharing again and give a chance before I move on to the last bit. For anything that people want to talk about in terms of relationship, connection, our bond with our kids, I know this is intense, but I think it's also one of the most profoundly important aspects of parenting at this age. So anyone who wants to ask a question or just share an experience or what's coming up for you as we're talking about this, I would love to hear from you. Erica.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, I'm on a new computer. Haven't used Zoom yet on it. I feel like the biggest struggle we have right now is this remote schooling thing. And they are so, at first I just felt like giving them their independence was a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
They're too young for that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's become just constant, and at this point, I'm just like, you lie to me, you don't get it done. I double check your work and you're not telling me the truth.
Mm-hmm.
I can't give you that freedom anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just all angry with each other about it. And
right.
It's
so this is
go ahead.
No. I want to hear what you were going to say.
I was just going to say, it's just the age right now, because of all this COVID remote learning, I don't think this would have been an issue had we all been in school and everything normal.
Yep.
We've given them a rote, but they're not ready for that rote because, we're giving them challenges like a college student would do.
Yeah.
And I didn't even succeed in college with that type of freedom. So, I'm trying to take a step back and help them, but it's also, it's just a point of contention, and I'm not a teacher, and it's frustrating.
Remind everyone how old your kids are.
Mine are 11 and 13.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really good point to say, like, I don't know about you guys, I'm a friggin' middle-aged woman, and if I were you guys watching this webinar, I also would have been like checking my email, seeing what happened on Facebook, checking if I have any notifications. Like, I'm a functional person who is a very goal-oriented and easily makes it from point A to point B, and I still don't really pay attention the way I quote unquote should ever. And so it's really ridiculous for us to think that kids are going to be able to do that. So you're absolutely right. I think this is a really great example of where two things are happening. One is the emotion, especially when kids lie. Most parents really get triggered when their kids are deceiving them. And that becomes this massive bone of contention. And I want to just point out, lying is a whole nother workshop. So I'm just going to address it really quickly right here, which is to say that the way that we're talking about parenting, the way that I'm teaching you right now, and if you decide that you want to keep working with me or come have a discovery call with me, the way that we're going to be approaching parenting is going to be non-punitive. The message of non-punitive parenting is you make mistakes and that is normal. When we get pissed off at our kids when they make mistakes, we become the world's biggest hypocrites, and the kids know it. How can we be saying you make mistakes and that is normal? Except this one mistake, that means you're a bad person. Or you make mistakes and that is normal. So why the hell am I all upset about it? That does make no sense. It's like we give ourselves away when we get angry with the kids. So I had a really big problem with this myself as a parent when my kids started lying, which I'm sorry to say, but almost all of them do. So when you were saying like, oh man, I don't think this would have been a problem if the kids were in school in person, maybe not. My opinion is that COVID isn't creating problems, it's revealing problems. And so some of the reveal might be that, you were confused about how hands-off to be. That's a great reveal. Some of the reveal might be your kids are going to resort to lying when they get called out. That was probably going to happen no matter whether COVID existed or not. You might not have realized it was happening, or would have taken you longer to realize or whatever, but I'm really sorry, truly, for myself as well, that lying is such a huge part of this chapter of life, but it is. And so when you can switch your mindset about lying to, this is just a misbehavior, just like spilling a glass of milk or whatever other nonsense our kids do, now we can actually respond to it neutrally and say, hey, turns out what you told me before isn't actually true. Did you want to tell me what really went on here? And if they tell you the truth, great. If they don't, you can say, well, unfortunately, what you're saying just really doesn't add up to what I think is going on. So I think that you're probably still misleading me. And we try to avoid saying the word lie or the word truth to our kids in those conversations. See, this is where I was talking about the communication skills. Like, there is a way to talk to our kids, avoiding using the word you, avoiding using the word but. So when you're saying you're lying to me, you said you did this, but you didn't, you, it's not going, it is, everyone's going to be angry. You're going to be angry because you feel violated and deceived, which I can't imagine a worse feeling, to be honest. And your kids are going to be angry because you're calling them out constantly, right? So switching the way that we talk, switching the way that we see our kids' misbehavior, and switching the way we respond to our misbehavior, those are like the three cornerstones. I guess if you have cornerstones, you have to have four, because 4 corners, right? Is that true? Anyway, but those are the 3 fundamentals here that I think are so profoundly important with this age group. So that's one point. The second point with remote learning is a great example of the combination of boundaries and enforcement. So if you work with me, you'll know that I say all the time, like, rules aren't parenting. Enforcing rules is parenting. Rules is just structure and boundaries and systems and things like that, which is all great. But all of our rules and all of our plans, whether we're talking about a family routine or rules about screen time, none of those things are any better than our plan for enforcing those rules. So if you don't have a plan to enforce a rule, if you're working with me, you don't set the rule. We don't implement anything until we know what we're going to do when the implementation falls short. So remote learning is a great example of that. You know, here's our set of expectations, and none of us had a plan. What was going to happen when the kids didn't do their homework? What was going to happen when they were watching Netflix when they were supposed to be in a Zoom class? You know, we didn't know. We're just like our kids. We're learning by making mistakes. So the way that I work with my clients to help with remote learning is to really take a step back and say, like, what's your plan? And also, by the way, what's your values? Do you even care if your kids are doing remote learning? What actually matters to you and why? And then how are you going to be giving that message to your kids? And what are you going to do when they disagree? And walking through not just setting up a plan, but creating a plan that aligns with your priorities and values. And then also creating a plan for what to do in those when that plan doesn't get respected. Okay, that was a really, really great question. And I think it's also a great example of the relationship thing, because you can imagine that if you were having a great bond and relationship and communication with your kiddo, talking about remote schooling would not be, World War III every time. So it's really important at this age, and especially when we're talking about kids, like how Jen brought up, when they're like on the brink of grappling with these heavy emotions. It's really, really important to know, like, the bond is intact. And I sent an email out a few days ago that was like, if the bond's intact, everything else is okay. And unfortunately for us, that's very true. Everything else, this too shall pass. As long as you keep that like thread between you and your kid intact, we can get over it. When that thread starts getting frayed, that's the number one first thing that needs to get fixed. Okay, one more screen sharing thing. There I go. You guys think I'm tech dum-dum now? You should have seen me the first time I started sharing slides on Zoom. Okay, let's talk about emotional staying sane. This is kind of what Jen brought up earlier. Like, okay, I have a therapist, but I still am like, what the hell am I doing? The therapist part's important. And even if you don't have a therapist, or even if you do have a therapist, if you're working with me, like, we're weaving in this emotional piece big time. So first of all, I just want to say that I acknowledge that it is really, really hard. And unfortunately, it's also really, really important, because like I said in the very beginning, the way that we deliver our consequences to our kids is the biggest thing. That neutrality piece is the determinant of the effectiveness of everything. So while it is really, really hard and challenging and rakes you over the coals, it's not optional, unfortunately. So the way that I work with my clients with the emotional piece and the support piece is in a top down and a bottom up approach simultaneously. So top down means we're talking with your brain. We're questioning your thoughts. My clients who are on this call will have heard me say many times, your thoughts aren't facts. So let's think about the perspective you're carrying around and see how we can tweak it. Let's think about what you think your job is as a parent. Let's think about what you think it is to be a good parent, what you think it means when your kids misbehave, like all of the thoughts that we have that are leading to emotions that drive our actions, that create our results. That's a top-down approach, and it's very important. So if you're working with me, you have a workbook, there's tons and tons of parent skills in that workbook. And there's also lots of exercises about, like, what does it mean to be a good mom? And what are your values? And blah, 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 because that thought piece is massive. The bottom-up approach is mindfulness, even though I really wish I had a different word for it, because I hate the word mindfulness. It is such a buzzword. What I think of when I think of mindfulness is just exercises we can do to remind ourselves that we came earthside, and so did our kids, already equipped to chill the F out. Look at that. I almost swore and I didn't. Kept it PG, everybody. So when you're working with me, you're going to learn tools for yourself to calm the F down, and you're going to learn how to teach your kids and how to help your kids, even when they don't know that you're helping them, calm the F down. Like, our bodies know how to chill out. If we just stop shaking the snow globe, everything will settle down and clarity will come. It's the part where we go into fight or flight that stops us from staying connected and being present. Mindfulness just means paying attention without judging to something that's happening right here and now. That's all it is. And it's as simple and as complicated as that, but it's very important. And when you're doing things from both directions, the top down and the bottom up approach, pretty soon, without you even realizing it, your capacity to hang with the stuff that's going on with your kid, it is exponentially bigger. You just have a different outlook on things, and you also have, your body is regulating differently. Like, literally inside, your neurons are firing differently. So that's that emotional piece. And like I said, the real takeaway from this is it's so important. I will say that it is non-optional. And the last thing I want to say about this is it feels different. This is why we need this support. This moment in time feels different. We have so much mind drama about what's going on. Our relationship feels like it hangs in the balance with these kids. The behaviors they're doing right now are scary. They are riskier, and we make it mean so much when they misbehave. That's different. It feels different right now because it is different. And also, our kids are different, like we talked about before. All of that stuff that's going on in their brains and bodies and heads and hearts are different. It is very different right now, and we need that support. Okay, and this is if you're my client, you've already heard me talk about this. This is what I call the brain tornado. This is when we get all stirred up, all of our thoughts and beliefs and worries and fears about our kids and about ourselves as parents get stirred up when our kids misbehave, and it keeps us with zero visibility with our kids. And so that's, I guess maybe you could say I'm beating a dead horse here, but it's just, I really want you to walk away from any of my presentations. Anytime you come to one of my workshops, you're going to walk away hopefully with the message that, yeah, there's really, really important parenting things that we need to be doing, and it's not enough. We have to be taking care of our heads and hearts, or we won't execute. And all of it will be just something in a workbook. And that's why I work with my clients. This is kind of just a schematic of how I work with my clients in a general sense, which is I work in 3 areas, not just parenting, but also in home management and in mindset work. Because if you're overwhelmed and chaotic, if you're crushed under a mountain of mom guilt and trying to beat your head against the wall, getting your kid to do something that's really outside of your job description, I can teach you every skill in the world, and it will never even reach the light of day. So like I said before, I do think it's important to take this work beyond a workshop. Obviously, it's what I've devoted my entire life to. So I really want to encourage you guys to take advantage of a free discovery call with me. If you're ready to take this work beyond today, if you're like, oh my God, this was some great stuff, but how do I actually execute? Or this is just the tip of the iceberg. I totally agree with you. So I want you to meet with me, and in a discovery call, I really spend at least the first half of that time just asking questions and getting to know you. I want to hear exactly what's going on with you. I want you to paint a picture for me of exactly where you're at. And I'm going to help you figure out why what you're doing right now isn't working and what it could be like instead. And you'll walk away from that call with me with a plan of what to do next, whether or not you decide you want to keep working with me. You can book that session at AnnKaplanParentCoaching.com. And also right after this workshop, you will be getting an email that has a link also. And like I said, anyone who books a session today, you're going to get that workbook that I showed you about how to apply those needs and values to understanding and managing your kids' behavior. And that's all I want to do with PowerPoint, for God's sakes. And I have set aside a lot of time for you guys right now for Q&A. So let the Q&A fly. I'm here to answer any and everything that you have for me. doesn't have to be specifically about what we talked about today. I would like it to be specifically about teens and tweens, but other than that, I'm here for you. So go ahead and unmute yourself if you want, and let's go from there. Everyone's waiting for someone else to ask a really inspirational question.
Okay.
Yay.
Somebody else needs to say something because I will totally jump in. This is years of therapy. I don't have a problem jumping in. So someone else better say something afterwards. I guess my question is, because I'm definitely going to be booking a consult. I just wrote your email and everything down. And so my question is, in your coaching, I mean, obviously I have like my own therapist who's helping me with my stuff, but do you kind of incorporate like, I guess I feel like what's going on with, my kid is obviously affecting me, and then vice versa. I have some health problems. I had to have brain surgery a couple of years ago, and afterwards I ended up losing primary custody of my son. We went to court 6 weeks after my brain surgery, which is, I fired my lawyer. Don't go to court 6 weeks after brain surgery, because you're gonna be totally out of it and not sounds very put together. So anyway, is that something that you kind of I guess one of the issues like with my therapy is like it's so much just on my side, and then with my son's therapy it's so much just on his side, and I'm like, hey, we're obviously we're a family, like we're all kind of in bed with each other as far as like what's going on with us mentally and how it affects each other.
Yeah.
Is that something that you focus on? Because that is like, I think one of the biggest issues that we're having in my family is like, we're all getting our own help, but it's kind of touching on each other, but like not enough.
Mm-hmm. So my first piece of advice there, and yes, this is absolutely something that we would do if we were working together, is to let's build up your skill set on how to share what's going on with you in therapy with your son in ways that don't blame him or shame him, but just really share your process with him, the things that you're realizing, and also without dumping your baggage on him, right? So like, let's say you have a therapy session and you realize like, oh my God, I totally bungled this, or like, you're stuck in this place that I think all moms go through at a certain point of like, it's my fault my kid's cutting himself, which
right.
I'll know
that's totally where I'm at right now. 100%. Yeah.
That's where you're at, and that's where you're going to hang out for a little while, and you're going to get through it. And especially if you and I keep working together, you're definitely going to get through it even faster. But while you're in that place, I still want you to be sharing with your kiddo. I just don't want you to be dumping that on him. And
right.
It's his job to tell you that it's not your fault that he's in this, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Lots of tools there. Like really, to me, what at least specifically for your situation, it's different for everybody, but for your situation, the value of this kind of work is that it's almost like the synapses that are connecting the neurons for you.
Right.
Okay, I've got this thing over here. My kid's got this thing over here. We have this hot mess here that we're really not doing anything about. And like,
right.
Talk about triangulation in a good way.
Right. Yeah. Because we both are definitely working on it, but I'm like, we got to figure out where we are together.
Absolutely. And you guys are both on your journey. And I think also something that I think is very relieving to most of my clients when they're working and getting coaching is the idea that like, you don't have to be done to be good. Like you guys can have a happy, connected, and well-behaved dynamic now, even though you're both still on your journey and you're not done yet.
Okay, cool.
I just for everybody, I realized this was stupid of me. I didn't put the link to actually book a call. So I just put it in the chat field if you want it. Like I said, you'll get an email too, but
awesome.
You already know you want to do it and you're in front of your computer right now and you know that you're going to forget to do it today and then you're going to miss out on the workbook. Just do it now. The link's right there.
Cool, thank you.
Anybody else with questions?
Yeah, please someone else say something because I put myself out. So no pressure.
So I do have a question. I have a 10 and a 12-year-old, and I know I'm the problem because I say stuff like, I think I'm just noticing what needs to be done. But the new answers are just either no or make me, which is my current favorite.
Great one. So can you give an example?
You need to go put your shoes on.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think, after just based on the stuff we've talked about today, what do you think would be a better approach there?
I mean, ideally, I want to be like, we're leaving in 5 minutes, and they know what 5 minutes is. And they put their shoes on. That's my dream world, right? But what would probably happen if I went with that is, you didn't tell me, and like emotional outburst.
Yeah. And then what? So what do you, based on the whole, like the 4 principles of experiential learning and not trying to control and all that stuff, what do you think is the next step there?
I mean, it always just becomes a question of how far we want to play it out, because we are a family of stubborn asses, right?
Right, totally.
And so I don't know. I would like it. I would like to be able to have those things play out without them turning into a big deal.
I would say just the beauty of a stubborn kiddo is that you don't need to be the brick wall they come up against. Everything in life will be that brick wall to them. You have the chance to be the only thing in life that isn't a fight. So for example, in this situation, like, we know, okay, we're not going to boss our kids around, and when experiences do the best teaching. So you can say 5 minutes till we leave. They don't have their shoes on. You go out to the car. They either rush to get their shoes on or they don't. They miss out on coming with you, or they come with you and they don't have shoes on. Especially if you decide to get in a power struggle about their shoes, they'll probably refuse to put their shoes on until the ultimate, last minute, right? And so they either walk to the car without their shoes on, and they get cold feet. They put their shoes on in the car. Like, all of these things, they're only a problem if you decide they're a problem. It's only a problem that your kids aren't ready to go on time if you decide it's a problem. And the way we decided it's a problem is by saying, well, I can't leave if they're not ready, which isn't true at all, especially with these older kids. You could totally leave. And
yeah, and one of them in particular would, one is easier than the other, but one of them in particular would play it out and until that moment of embarrassment, and then eventually like put shoes on to go in wherever, but then it's become like a big dramatic emotional thing.
Right. And is that a problem?
It feels like a problem,
right.
But maybe it's not.
To me, this is like the marriage of like the thought work and stuff like that. Like, we have a lot of thoughts about what it means when our kids act like total a-holes in public, right? The drama dance, the meltdown, and all of that stuff. And once that feels like this like unacceptable outcome, now it's your problem. It's your problem to get your kids to put their shoes on. It's your problem to get to avoid the drama spiral. It becomes your job. And your kids, this is where I talked about, remember in the very beginning when I said the kids don't have any skin in the game. Like, there's nobody in this world who's going to take ownership of something that somebody else already owns when in these kinds of scenarios. Like, why would they bother worrying about whether they're ready on time if you're going to worry about it for them? And that's what's happened, because in your mind, the outcomes, my kid doesn't have their shoes on, my kid gets left behind, my kid has like this crazy meltdown. Those 3 are unacceptable outcomes. And so now you're putting all your energy into shodding your children instead of them. And then they're so old, right? Like, they're totally old enough to do that themselves, and they're totally old enough to be left behind, even if it's just for you to drive around the block till they see that you mean business. All of those things are possible, and it's totally okay. And this is the other great thing about having neutrality with our kids, is they're allowed to feel any kind of emotion. The entire spectrum of human emotion is available to our kids, because no matter what they feel, it's not a problem for us. And that's a powerful message for kids to get, of like, I can be upset, and my mom's feelings aren't my job, basically. I'm allowed to feel pissed and upset and embarrassed and all of those things. And my mom's going to be totally empathetic about it. She's not going to be upset that I feel that way. She's not going to give me a lecture, all those things, right? So when they're all upset and angry in the car, and maybe everyone else gets to go bowling, and they're still in the car with their shoes off and crying and screaming about it, you can say, I can see that you're really, really upset. And that's such a bummer. I can't wait for you to be ready to hang out with us again, and walk away.
Okay. Well, we'll give it a whirl.
Yeah, do it. Sign up for a session and we'll talk about it in way more detail. It'll be great. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So my son, for this year, we did a online like homeschool program,
Mhm.
and my son's starting high school next year. And so we've gone through, my husband and I are a little different in what we want for his high school education. So we told our son to go ahead and give us pros and cons for going into high school versus sticking with the program that he's doing now. He loves the program he's doing now because he's done with his schoolwork in like 2.5 hours, and he sets his own schedule, and he's been really good at time management, and I've seen a lot of independence in him, and he's only 14. So he wants to stick with this. My husband wants him to go into a larger school setting for more activities and more socialization. And I kind of fall in the middle where I can see both sides. So how much power do you essentially give the 14-year-old to have to say, like what do you do in this type of a situation to really figure out like what's the best option?
So this is a really great example of how this workbook that I was showing you could be really helpful, because we use those kinds of exercises to approach decision making. So it seems like your son is doing well where he is right now. Your husband wants him to have more than what he's doing right now. And what the real question is what do you think successful high school looks like? Meaning not like what building is it in or whatever, but like what do you think are metrics of success, and I don't know what I would say, like appropriate elements to be in a high school education. If the program he's in right now is giving him all of those things, then as long as if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? If you're saying, yeah, he's doing great here, but there are things about a high school education that he's not getting, then the question becomes, okay, well, how can he get those things? Doesn't necessarily mean he has to go to high school. It could mean, hey, you know what? The thing you're doing right now is fine. And here's what I think is important. And you can help me decide how you're going to meet these criteria. Maybe it means you're joining an extracurricular. Maybe it means you do some sort of community outreach. Maybe it means you add on your own homeschooling element that's outside of the curriculum you're subscribed to. Maybe it means that he gets an internship or a job, all of those things, right? And he can decide. You can either go to high school where these needs will be met for you, basically, or if you really don't want to go to high school, I support you 100%, and let's come up with a plan of how we're going to achieve all of these things, and be very, very clear. Like I said before, what happens when things don't get met, when he doesn't go out and get himself an internship, or when he starts whining about having to go and do his extracurricular, or when he starts having missed assignments, whatever it is. Saying, hey, we're going to maybe have a 3 strikes policy. If I have to talk to you more than 3 times about this plan that we've created, I think we can all recognize that it probably would be best for you to be in a high school situation, that kind of thing. So it's not necessarily about like how much freedom do we give kids. They'll tell us how much freedom they can handle, right? So your son is telling you, I can handle this, right? At least from where you sit right now and what you know right now.
Right.
It's also about like, well, is this the experience that is aligned with my values, my priorities, what's in integrity for me as a parent with this age? Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah, no, definitely. That's very helpful.
Yeah. Well, I hope you sign up for a discovery call, because you're going to get that workbook, and that'll help you with this too. Get really clear and things like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure thing. Anybody else? Erica, I'm dying for you to ask a question. I don't know why, but your face is just like adorable.
Oh, I mean, I know you've got a separate thing on lying, but what is if you could just summarize in like one response when you know they're lying or you don't trust them, but you want
Yeah,
to expose that you probably think they're lying
right.
without saying, are you telling me the truth?
So to
You
me,
know,
what I sense from you isn't just that some wordsmithing is necessary, although that's
yes.
certainly part of it, but I think there's a lot of thought work and emotional work around lying that would be almost more important, because you're still approaching this and like, how can I prove that he's a liar? And really make him, basically, how can I shame him for his behavior? Of course,
Okay.
that's not what you're consciously thinking, but subconsciously, that's where your head is going, right? Like,
Right.
lying is shameful, and therefore my child should feel ashamed for lying. So it must be my job to shame him.
Mm.
And well, of course, our job as parents is not to shame our children, right?
Right.
But lying, I mean, this isn't the only time that that thought process kind of takes over, but lying is the big one, in my opinion, that from what I have observed. That's the place where it's like, you're just a bad person. Like, you lie, liars are bad, therefore you are bad. And at this point of raising our kids, it's like, oh my God, my kid is bad. I don't know about you guys, but when my kids were really little, like, everyone would say, oh, what do you think they're going to be when they grow up? Or what do you want? Or what, all this stuff. And I'd say, honestly, I just don't care as long as they're not dicks. That feels like that's my job as a parent, right?
Right.
Well, guess what? I didn't get to pick. Like,
Yeah.
no bad people, quote unquote, bad people out there in the world were turned bad because their parents decided, I want to raise a jerk. It just turned out that way. We don't get to choose. So when it comes to lying, it's so upsetting because it is like, how did I raise a bad person? And it's almost, we have this feeling of like, it's kind of like too late. Like, here I see the fruits of my labor. This is what I made. This is awful. And it feels just shameful to us as parents. Like, we should be ashamed of ourselves for having done whatever wrong thing we did that created this, walking monster. And so that piece I really feel needs to shift, because if you're working with me, we're not about exposing a lie necessarily, or if we are, it's in a way that's super non-shamey. So the one liner I would have you use in that situation would be to say, okay, well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Can you tell me more about that? Because I'm having a really hard time understanding how this could be true, for example. And then, they may or may not tell you the truth, or they might just double down and get even more elaborate in their lie or whatever. And if it still sounds like a pile of crap, you can say, you know what, it just seems fishy to me, but I'll figure it out. And you just walk away. Once the kid has had one chance to come clean, they are no longer your source for the truth. You will find the truth through other means, whether it's checking with the parent of the friend or the teacher at school or your co-parent or whatever. And when you find out that it's a lie for sure, you can come back to your kid and say, it turns out that's really not true. I did a little bit of investigating on my own and I learned this, and this. So, once again, I'd love to give you a chance to tell me whatever you think I need to know about this. And if they come clean, great. If they don't, great. There's a consequence for lying. It has to be totally neutral. And so, like, I lead a parenting coaching group for parents. A couple of the moms who are logged in here today are in that group with me. And it comes up all the time where it's like, well, how do I stay neutral? The real answer is, you are neutral. Like, sure, sometimes we have to fake it until we make it. But the real goal is to get to a place where you truly are neutral about your child's behavior. It doesn't mean anything about you, doesn't mean anything about the future for this child, doesn't mean anything about what kind of person that kid is, doesn't mean anything except for the fact that your child told a falsehood. And when you really, really are neutral about it, it becomes so you don't need me to tell you what to say, because what I'm saying are the things that someone who doesn't actually care that their kid has lied would say.
Mhm.
right?
And what should these consequences for lying about doing your schoolwork be?
So in our family, the rule of thumb is if you have a misbehavior, there's a consequence for your misbehavior. If you lie about your misbehavior, your consequence is doubled. So for example, in the not doing the schoolwork, you can say, hey, it turns out that your schoolwork isn't actually done. You know, if you had told me the truth about that, you know, you would just need to get your schoolwork done before you could have screen time today. But since you lied about it, you'll also be missing out on screen time tomorrow, for example.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then conversely, if they tell you the truth, if they say, when you say in any of those times when you give them the chance to tell the truth, when you say, hey, you know, it turns out you really didn't do that. Do you want to, is there anything you want to tell me? If they say, I didn't really do my homework today, Mom, I lied because I wanted to be able to have screen time or whatever, you can say, that's awesome. I'm so glad you told me the truth. If you had kept lying to me, you would have lost screen time for tomorrow too. But since you told me the truth, that's awesome. You know the rules. Just got to get your homework done and then you can have screen time. I know you can do it.
Yeah.
And that's it. You're making me prove my chops. Yeah, Erica, you should definitely set up a discovery call if you haven't already, because I think this is a perfect example of how it feels really strongly like I need these skills, and you do, but I'm telling you from my perspective as a coach, it's not going to work unless you get the other stuff.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome, Erica.
Yeah, I'll sign up right now.
Yeah, I just honestly don't know why anyone wouldn't. It's free. Why wouldn't you want it?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions? I'm just looking for people to unmute themselves. I really need to just even stop talking about the raise hand thing. No one likes it. Anybody else who has any questions? Going once. Going twice. All right, guys, if nobody else is going to unmute and ask questions, which is totally fine, I'm going to call it a wrap for this workshop. I hope you guys got some amazing, helpful material out of today. I hope that you are inspired to take this work beyond today. If it's a discovery call with me, and that's the end of it, even so, it's going to be pretty transformative for you. If it's a discovery call and then we decide that we're going to take a journey together, even better. I'm excited no matter what. And it was a real pleasure serving you guys today. Have an awesome day, everybody. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.